I want to just first thank you, Ms. Arthur B., for coming to be a part of our Reach One, Teach One ministry. We want to have this opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the 3 questions.
Well, I appreciate your asking me to come. You know, the minute you asked me when I found out what it was about, didn't have any problem with participating. My full name is Arthur Beatrice Williams, but everybody calls me Arthur B. I basically was known as Beatrice as a child because Arthur B was a pretty heavy burden when I was a little girl. But I grew up in Wichita Falls, went to Bishop College in the early 50s, and came back home short of a degree. And for a good long while, I worked in private homes as a domestic. And in 1958, I went to work for Charlie Ferris, who was a practicing attorney as a historical matter. She was the first African-American woman admitted to practice law in Texas. And I worked for her as her legal secretary for 13 years. Then I went to work at Wichita County as a court coordinator for the presiding district judge in Wichita Falls. And after that, I went to work for county court as a secretary at county court and the mental health coordinator, and coordinated the mental health commitments for 52 counties for the state hospital district. In 1983, I was appointed a Justice of the Peace judge, and because for an unexpired term, and when a term is more than 2 years in length, you have to run for that position. So in 1984, I ran for the position of Justice of the Peace, won and held it for almost 12 years, retired in 1995, and for a while I just did charity work. And then in 1999, I ran for city council, stayed on city council until term limits caused my term to expire. I was no longer on the council after 2005, but I served for the last 5-6 months from February through May as the mayor of Wichita Falls.
Wow.
And now I'm just doing do-gooder stuff. I'm a professional do-gooder. That's my job. Yes. I do good.
That's all right. That's great. So at this time, we're going to turn the camera on to you, and the spotlight's going to be on you for the rest of the time. And the 3 questions I want to ask, and you feel comfortable asking them in the way that you feel comfortable. The first question is, how did slavery affect your culture? And then the second question was, how did they overcome the effects of slavery? And the third, what advice would you give to your audience?
Well, you know, slavery affected our culture in that, in a historical perspective, and as a matter of how people were living, when you have no control over your existence, you have really no control over your future. And so I think what happened because of the way we were brought to this country as people who were literally kidnapped or hoodwinked into getting on the boat. My theory is that they probably rang a bell and did a flag or something to get us on here, because African Americans are way too smart to be deluded into getting on a boat where they didn't know where they were going. So there had to be some trickery. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. But I think that's what happened. And when we came here as slaves. And even if you were free people where you came from, if you're held slaves long enough and your will is constantly suppressed, you begin to act like a slave and enslaved culture. So I think for a long time we were treated like animals, did not think like human beings. When your family can be sold out from under you, you don't even develop a closeness for family. You have no closeness. So I think that's what happened. And of course, with the onset of the Underground Railroad and that kind of thing, at least our people discovered and perhaps made a conscious decision in not being at that time. I don't know what caused it, but I know that it was the best thing that ever happened, that they decided to flee from the slave holders and that sort of thing. And I think even now, some of us have not had the family or the familial upbringing that breeds out that slave mentality. So some of us are still affected by it because we don't seem to think free. You know, there's an expression, how can I think free when I haven't been free before? And I think we permit ourselves to be enslaved by ignorance. So a lot of us don't seem to have an understanding of what education will do for us. So it's almost a self-perpetuating kind of gloom and doom kind of thing. So you have to work hard at it. But there is what we do. What we've always been able to, we wouldn't have been able to survive slavery as a culture intact had it not been for the fact that we were strong. We might have been gullible and susceptible, but we certainly were mentally strong. And I'm looking at our culture now, and I think we're intellectually strong. For people who were not even permitted to learn to read and write, I think we've developed some geniuses, real geniuses. Yes, so we must have had an innate intelligence that comes shining through. Yes. We just have to work on it. Yeah. So is there anything that you want to ask me to flesh out that, or?
Pretty much, you know, you set the foundation to give us all the opportunity to understand about history, because I myself, you know, as growing up, I didn't have an opportunity to be taught. Like you said, I was not able to be taught on history. You know, I spent most of my time trying to survive. Yeah. You know, trying to survive within my own culture.
And I think sometimes we're embarrassed by things of our history that were not of our own doing. Yes. There's no reason for you to be embarrassed about being, if you were, for instance, a slave. If you didn't participate in your slavery, there's nothing for you to be embarrassed. You become embarrassed when there's an opportunity for you to do better and you don't. Yes. So I'm absolutely convinced that probably because we are ancestors of slaves, we are stronger people. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger anyway. And I think we're a strong group of people. I think we're capable of enormous good things. It's just a matter of having the mental energy and the physical energy to try it. And I think that's, if I had anything to tell people going forward, and it's if you don't learn from your past, you're going to repeat it. That's just a fact. So we need to focus on education. We need to focus on the family as an intact structure. Okay. Fathers need to quit walking off from their wives. Men need to keep walking away from the women who bear children for them. And everybody needs to quit leaving their children to be reared by somebody else. Okay. You need to get your own self in shape to rear your own children. Yes. Do the right thing by your children, and spend time. I know when my little girl was little, I hear women of that era talking about how their children didn't stop them from doing anything they wanted to do. Okay. Well, mine did.
That's all right.
You can't do everything you want to do. Yes. And rear children. It's not a do as I do kind of society. Mm-hmm. Do as I say do and not as I do. Mm-hmm. It's you have to live the right kind of life. Yes. To produce the right kind of life. And so I think it would be wise for the adults to always remember that their children don't need them as a best friend. Yes. Their children need them as role models, and that they need to spend their children's early years in productive things of rearing them. Yes. Then they'll become their children's best friend at a later date. But and I think their children need to be. We need to go back to a period where kids obeyed their parents, and everybody in the community could help you rear your children. That's all right. So that you can have good, healthy, and safe kids. Because part of what's happening now is that nobody seems to want to reach out and touch anybody else's family, their life, and I think it would be helpful. Don't know whether I'll ever live to see it, but that's what I certainly think. I saw the movie Selma, and since that was part of the time that I was younger, not necessarily young, because I'm just a few years younger than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Okay. So that was historically, it was of my young adulthood and all. And when I look at in my recollections and in what I experienced when it was going on, how people died, came close to dying, how they suffered greatly at the hands of people who wanted to keep us both physically and mentally enslaved, and how they fought to make sure that that didn't happen. And we don't even go to vote.
Yes.
We don't insist that our children stay in school. We don't insist that our children lead decent lives. You know, this is the slavery.
Yes.
That's the worst thing for us.
Yes.
The other slavery is nothing because it was against our will.
Yes.
And these are the
good.
things that we could knowingly do something about and
Yes.
don't. And it's really important to me that we change our attitudes toward our responsibility to our families.
Yes.
And to rear our children so that they can bring new generations of children who are exceptional, because I think we are.
Yes.
But I kind of believe in the African American family. I believe that our history has made us strong. So
Yes.
there's nothing that we can't do. We've got too many people who are examples of it already.
Yes. And you're one of them.
Well, I hope so. I do the
Yes.
best that I can. There's never a time that if I'm able, that I won't help somebody.
Yes.
I won't help a child. In our family, my daughter and I have taken young people who've had, you know, sometimes you can lead children wrong if they're struggling too hard to eat, have decent clothes and all. So we try to help make sure that they at least have that, so that they won't have an excuse to leave the straight and narrow to go out and get those
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And to try to help them. So it's very important that we help each other. That, you know, that old thing, it takes a village to raise a child, that's
Yes.
no joke.
That's true.
And that we should all become a village.
Yes.
Each one of us can be a village of one. So I can't say enough about what we need to do to help each other. We need to quit thinking that when one of us has quote, made it, and sometimes, you know, making it, sometimes it's just having a job.
Amen.
Then we forget the people behind us.
Yes.
Well, you
Yes.
can't do that.
Yes.
You don't know how hard it is for somebody, and you know, it's all too easy to say, well, I did it,
Yes.
and you can too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but maybe not as easy as you can. So it's not going to hurt us to help somebody else.
That's
It just makes our society a much better thing. We need to be more generous with our time.
Yes.
We don't participate enough in the good things in our community. Way too few of us as African Americans even participate to do anything but go to church.
Yes.
And the Lord's going to thank you for going to church, but He knows how your heart is. Anyway, He also wants you to get out and help other folk in your community.
That's good about
it. It's kind of like you have the brain to be a doctor and you won't go to school.
Yes.
And then you blame it on somebody else. The Lord said, hey, I gave you this brain, now you use it.
Right.
So He did the same thing for us in terms of,
Yes.
of our ability to participate in the things that make our community a good place to live.
That's all right.
To vote. Absolutely to vote. Why on earth would we live in a society where people die for their right to vote and then we don't?
Correct.
And to serve on juries. You talk about how we get disparate sentencing,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you get called for jury duty, you don't go and serve on the jury. Well, who else is going to pass on our people if we don't participate in it? So
That's good.
I guess it boils down to not being enslaved anymore. Don't participate in just a little bit of society. Participate in all of it.
That's great. Well, that's great advice.
So, you know, it's not a whole bunch, but it works.
Oh, man. I thank you, Miss Arthur D, for coming.
Well, thank you for asking me.
It's an honor. Like I said, it's my first time physically laying eyes on you, and when I called you, it was like fresh breath of air. She said, yes, I would like to be a part of, not knowing the full concept behind it, but just the thought of being able to reach out, to reach one, to teach one, and your heart is set on the community, you know, and I have to say that I have to get more involved in the community, and then I pray to God that this is my beginning.
The community has been good to me
Yes.
and for me, and